All right, just some background information on the Hellenistic Greek culture, really quick. This period is called the Hellenistic because the Greeks called themselves the Hellenes. Um, this period of the Hellenistic era kind of occurs when Alexander the Great dies at 33 in 323 BC from an illness, and the Greek kingdoms are then split into four, and they're no longer city states. The style overall just has a greater sense of emotionality, drama, and realism. We see that there is a new interest in humanization versus the idealism that we saw in the early classical era. One of the greatest um, differences from the other periods to the Hellenistic period of Greek culture is the introduction of bronze. We figured that this allowed for more dynamic pieces. The material bronze is much stronger than stone and is extremely malleable. The molten liquid will take the form of any mold it is poured into, allowing the figures to be more realistic and more fluid. This, in turn, allowed artists to create more pieces with just a greater sense of movement, leading to more dynamic art. So, the statue of a victorious youth. It was found by a fisherman in the 1960s off the coast of Italy, and the subject is unknown, but the boy appears to be in his late teens, and he also appears to be an athlete, as indicated by the olive wreath. Um, our historians believe that it is in the style of Lysippus, which is one of the major sculptures of the 4th century BC. He's also known as one of the court sculptures of Alexander the Great, and his overall characteristics just included more of a stylistic form of naturalism, fluid musculature, and just softer forms. And especially when comparing that to earlier classical period where there was more angular forms. Um, all right, so here's a close up. We get to see how the figure is standing in sort of an S-shaped motion, especially from the back side. Here from the side angle, we can kind of see that same S-shaped motion. Um, when looking at the figure from the back, you see a great attention to detail in the shape of the figure's body and the musculature. Um, and we see, this being represented as a almost a 100% real lifelike figure. There's no idealization. There's no 7 pack abs or 6 pack abs as we saw before in the classical era. Um, and we just get a greater sense of movement in the way the figure kind of moves his hands. Um, we also see how the bronze has aged. We see this very nice brown color, and we also see this very nice green color, um, and then the orange color that kind of appears from the rust. In this figure, you can see how the light really reflects off of the figure's body, and how his skin kind of appears to glow. The first comparison is with the Croesus Kuro statue from the archaic Greek period. We see that this figure is just overall more rigid, more stiff. Um, we see that in kind of like the strength and posture of his legs, um, how his arms are straight by his side. Um, and we also see that by the way his head is also straight forward and straight up as well. Although there is a greater sense of naturalism, the figure still appears to be quite rigid. Here's a close up of that. Side by side, we see how this figure is just overall more rigid um, and less dynamic than the statue of the victorious youth. The next comparison is Polydeclides' De Ripheus from the High Classical Greek period. And this piece was also originally done in hollow cast bronze, but most likely what we have here is a Roman marble copy. There's a lot of similarities in the two pieces of um, the victorious youth and the De Ripheus. For sure, we see the contrapposto used. We see the shift in weight used as well. Um, there is a greater sense of um, sensibility to the body as well. Probably more so in the Dorypheus. We see there's more of an idealized look in the way his chest are shaped and the way his muscles are formed. But the comparison to this is really just how similar it is in form, and also that more idealized form in this sculpture versus in the statue of the victorious youth. And the final comparison is a Riace bronze warrior. This piece was also found off of a shipwreck in Italy as well. We see that it's also a lost wax or holocast bronze. And we see just quite a bit of similarities as well with this one, despite the slightly brown and orange that we saw in the other bronze. And that was probably due to the lighting. We do see an extreme amount of sensibility to the figure's muscles and his form. Um, the human anatomy seems very well pronounced. We also see the nudity and perfect proportions here, but let's take a look at the comparison. There is a extreme sense of idealization in this warrior. And I want to just compare that to this victorious youth of the Hellenistic period. We do see that there is this figure is also appears to be younger. However, we do see a less idealized form. This figure, the youth appears just to be a little bit more realistic in the way he stands, in the way his muscles, and it appears to be a little bit more of a softer look to this figure. There's a little bit more weight on this figure. In this warrior here, we have um, quite a bit of muscle and very little fat here. And just the sense of idealization that we have in this is what we want to take away from this piece on the right. Here we have all four compared, and the side by side is even more vivid when we get to see the more rigid look in this Curious statue here, and then we see a less rigid, um, more naturalistic look here, and then it kind of feeds into this more idealized look, and then we have finally the less idealized Hellenistic statue here.